Hello, my name's Carolyn Howe. I'm the head of the junior school at Bedford Girls' School, and welcome to our Curriculum Conversations podcast. The subject today is how do we assess pupils in the junior school? The reason I chose to talk about assessment today was because assessment feeds into every lesson in school before it's even taught. When teachers are planning lessons for your daughter, they begin by asking two simple questions. What do I want each girl to learn? And how will I know she's learnt it? And from there on in, the lessons, tasks and resources are all geared towards these two simple questions. The first question is the learning intention, and the second question is all about assessment. It's the learning outcome. We've also made some changes about the way we record and track our assessments in the junior school, and in fact, in the language that we're using. So today, I hope through our curriculum conversation that you develop a better understanding of how we assess pupils and how this is tracked throughout their time in the junior school. This in turn should help you to feel better equipped when talking to your daughters about their learning. Hopefully you'll feel better informed during the parent-teacher consultations, and also I hope that you leave knowing why we approach assessment in the way that we do. If you have any questions or feel that I haven't addressed assessment in enough detail, then please do contact me after the talk. Before I begin talking about assessment and about what we do here in the junior school, I want to begin by sharing with you some of my memories of my own school days. As a girl, I went to our local primary school in the 1970s. Our school used a scheme called Alpha and Beta, with the most able children working from the Alpha book and the rest from Beta. Now, because children were pretty much left to their own devices in those days, and the teacher was always very busy attending to a queue at her desk, maths ability was often determined by a child's ability to read. Now, I loved reading and spent most of my time at home curled up with whatever Enid Blyton adventure I could get my hands on, so I therefore made it into Alpha Group. Now, back in school, those maths lessons involved a quick demonstration on the board from the teacher, and then we did endless practice from the book. And when I'd finished, I got to go and queue up with all the others at the teacher's desk, desperately waiting for that page full of ticks and maybe even a silver or gold star from the teacher's drawer. However, nobody really checked to see if I understood what I was doing. There wasn't really any assessment going on. Sure, I could copy and then repeat the examples, but I didn't really understand what I was doing. And in fact, despite being in the Alpha Group at primary school, I soon lost ground at senior school. I found maths quite difficult. Don't get me wrong, I went to a great school with excellent teachers, but I did need extra tuition, and it used to take me a long time to make connections in my mathematical understanding. It was a subject that just never came easily to me. It wasn't actually until I was at university studying for my teaching degree and learning about early acquisition of number and early calculation that I had a bit of a eureka moment and finally understood many of the methods I'd tirelessly practiced in my primary school days. Now, I'm sure this type of teaching and learning is in many ways familiar to you as well from your own school days. But really, I wanted to share it with you to reassure you that we've actually moved on a great deal since then. And hopefully this story I've told you demonstrates why I'm passionate about active learning, and also, really, more importantly, about the critical role of the teacher in assessing every individual girl's understanding of those key concepts that we cover in lessons. So how do we assess in the junior school? Well, the thing about assessment is that it's all about understanding, and it takes place all the time. In the conversations a teacher has, the questions she asks when marking work. We can assess by giving verbal feedback, written comments, we quite often say 2 stars and a wish, or through a quick test, maybe some spellings, times tables, mental maths. This type of assessment is what we call formative assessment, as it informs us of the next steps, and lessons will be prepared to address these next steps. Girls themselves are involved in this type of assessment. When assessment is formative, girl and teacher share a common understanding of what constitutes quality work. That is, they have the same standards for achievement. Both pupil and teacher can compare her performance to these standards. The pupil often assesses as she is working on the task in hand and upon completion. The teacher may also assess the completed work or she might assess while the work is in progress. Following the assessment, teaching and learning activities are adjusted to close the gap between the pupil's performance and the standard. So the teacher not only assesses the pupil's performance, but also provides feedback and guidance, enabling each girl to improve her performance. The pupil will then use what she's learnt from that assessment to improve in future. The teacher also assesses the instruction that preceded the performance, so the teacher will adjust their instruction and their lessons based on the assessment. We also assess pupils every term through independent tasks. This is like we have a maths test, a comprehension and a piece of unaided writing. This type of assessment is what we call summative. It tells us where misconceptions have occurred and also tells us how well a girl has understood the learning over the term. These types of assessment give us an overview and allow us to track overall progress. So we've assessed your daughter in her learning through ongoing formative assessment, some summative assessment towards the end of the term. But how do we keep a track of this? And how do we ensure she's making a good progress across the year and across all the years that she's in the junior school? Now, this is where some changes have been taking place. In September 2014, the government introduced a new national curriculum with a great deal of fresh content and ambitious expectations of learning. It's a curriculum designed to provide children with the essential knowledge, skills and understanding that they require as citizens of Great Britain. Now, in response to this new curriculum, we developed and wrote and introduced our bespoke enhanced curriculum in the junior school, and we also adapted our schemes of work to ensure that our expectations continued to be above and beyond those in the state sector. The new national curriculum, however, did not provide any detail about statutory requirements expected in each year group. The old national curriculum levels have been removed, and instead the national curriculum has provided two standards: knowledge to be acquired by the end of Key Stage 1 and knowledge to be acquired by the end of Key Stage 2. This is due to the idea that learning is accumulative and requires time. For the junior school, we focus on the knowledge to be acquired by the end of Key Stage 2. For us at BGS, national curriculum levels had always allowed us to benchmark the attainment of our girls against national expectations. So we knew that finding the right assessment methodology for us was going to be the biggest challenge. We've therefore spent 2 years researching and developing a system which allows us to assess and track each girl's attainment and benchmark this against expectations for her age and for her as an individual. While researching the best method of assessment, we decided that we needed a format that would allow us to track a more detailed progression than these broad objectives of the national curriculum, and also one which assessed the depth of understanding against key skills. We also needed to develop a method that would give us hard numerical data, so that we could set individual targets for each girl, which challenged us to add the optimum value in progress during her time in the junior school. And finally, we wanted to find a system that would allow us to set key performance indicators for the junior school as a whole. And as a result, we've chosen to adopt something called the depth of learning approach to assessment. So what is this depth of learning approach? Well, in essence, this means that when we assess girls, we do so by providing them with increased cognitive challenge, allowing them to apply the skills which they've learnt independently in a range of contexts. Rather than moving on to the next skill needlessly, we look for their depth of understanding, or their level of mastery, if you like. Such thinking is encapsulated in the scenario in the slide. We want to challenge our children to become independent, well-rounded individuals who take ownership of their learning and become deep thinkers. We do not want them to have to swim across the water alone. Rather, we want them to be diving for pearls of wisdom and learning through discovery, a skill expected for children who go on to achieve high levels in their GCSEs and A-levels or IB. And moreover, we want girls to be able to apply their knowledge and skills in a range of contexts within school and real life. So we've adopted the analogy, really, of paddling. That's us just beginning. I've got a basic understanding there. Snorkeling, we're advancing, we're getting a bit better, and finally diving, and diving shows the depth of learning. Here's an example of the questions that we might ask girls to assess their understanding in maths. And you'll see here on the first column on the left, this would show some mastery of the understanding of the underlying concept. The concept here, the learning objective if you like, would be to add and subtract whole numbers with more than 4 digits, including using formal written methods. And on the right hand column, we'd be looking at someone, we'd be assessing someone for greater depth of understanding. So how will our children be assessed? Well, this year we've begun using this depth of learning approach in order to assess your child's learning. We'll assess their learning in each subject, English and maths, and also in each subject through the enhanced curriculum. All learning will be grouped into 2 milestones. During years 3 and 4, all girls will be assessed on their depth of learning against the concepts contained in milestone 2. In years 5 and 6, all children will be assessed against their depth of learning within milestone 3. During each term, we will continually assess the depth of your child's understanding within that milestone, whether it's basic, advancing, or deep. Each milestone will have 6 assessment points: Basic 1, Basic 2, Advancing 3, Advancing 4, and Deep 5 and Deep 6. Now these points are not a mere label about a child. Basic is not less able than deep. Rather, they allow us to determine each child's level of understanding of a concept in the curriculum. All children begin each milestone at the basic level. Here, at basic, they're acquiring new skills and are dependent upon the support of adults in order to learn new concepts. A child at the basic level will be able to name, describe, follow instructions, use, match, recognise, label and recall concepts and skills essential in a specific milestone. After children are able to demonstrate this ability on multiple occasions, they move on to the advancing stage. They're more independent learners here, capable of making some degree of decision whilst applying some of their skills with guidance. Typically, they're able to explain, classify, infer meaning, make predictions, interpret, summarise and apply their skills to solve problems. And finally, some children may reach the deep level of thinking. This involves a high level of cognitive challenge, where children are expected to apply their skills in a range of complex contexts without the guidance of adults. At this stage, children are able to solve non-routine problems. They can appraise, explain concepts, hypothesize, investigate, design and prove. At deep level 6, children will have mastered all the skills and concepts taught. And when this happens, in year 4, they'll progress to be assessed against the next milestone. And in year 6, they will move on to our mastery scale that assesses against year 7, 8 and 9 expectations. It's important to note, however, that only some children will reach this level of understanding during the course of their learning journey. There's also a shift in what teachers are looking for when assessing pupils against the milestones. When looking for depth of learning, we're assessing the child's cognitive domain, and this entails looking for widespread examples and evidence. It's much more bespoke, and there isn't a one-size-fits-all model. Take a look at an example from English Milestone 2. The learning objective is to use imaginative description with indicators of evidence you would expect to see for basic, advancing, and deep understanding. In this example, you can see the learning objective, the key milestone indicators, and then the criteria of which we would assess girls' understanding, such as they may have a basic understanding, they may be advancing, or they may have a deep understanding. So how will you know if your child is making good progress? All children will be expected to make good progress from their starting point. This assessment system works on the basis that every pupil begins each milestone at a basic level. And to illustrate this, on this slide, I've used some characters you might be familiar with. Pupils are set targets according to their depth of learning in the previous milestone. For example, Hermione would have been assessed at the end of her previous milestone, milestone 1, with a depth of learning index of deep 6. She is therefore targeted to complete milestone 2 with a depth of learning index at the same level. On this slide as well, we've put in the old national curriculum levels just to help as a guide, and it's helping us as teachers as well make sure that we're getting the girls into the right categories. You'll see also that the progression is not necessarily linear, okay, and that we wouldn't necessarily expect every pupil to get into the deep category. So Ron Weasley, you'll see, starts at basic 1, but he finishes the milestone in advancing 4. Now that would be on the assumption then, we can assume there from that he gained advancing 4 in milestone 1. So we would say we were happy with his overall progress. This method of tracking is actually exactly the same as the method that we used as teachers when we were tracking the girls against the old national curriculum levels. And it's a really good way of us just making sure term on term that each girl is moving across and making the progress that we want to see from them. To track the long-term progress of girls, we're going to be assigning a numerical score to each girl's attainment. In the junior school, we will expect pupils to accumulate 12 points during their time with us. If we take a look back at Ron Weasley, he was assessed on entry to the school at advancing 4 for milestone 1. This gave him a score of 4. He would therefore be expected to attain a score of 10 at the end of milestone 2 and 16 at the end of milestone 3. This scoring method, again, is in fact very similar to the way we tracked the progress and measured our value-added scores within the national curriculum levels. So as I said, the expectation would be every 2 years the girls to make progress of 6 points with an overall progress over 4 years of 12. To complement the depth of learning method of assessment, we're also going to be using standardised information about your daughter so that we can compile a full picture of her level of attainment. Standardised tests are based on key areas of the curriculum, and they test the knowledge that each child has acquired against the criteria of a subject's programme of study. Now, the standardised tests help us in many ways. Firstly, they'll provide quantifiable evidence of progress. They also allow us to compare a child against their peers of the same age, both locally, nationally and internationally, and this is again something that we could do with the national curriculum levels. Thirdly, the standardised tests will help us to take into consideration a child's actual age when measuring progress. And this is particularly beneficial for girls who were born in the summer term. And finally, it helps us to measure small increments of progress. We're going to be using standardised assessments for entry into the school as normal, and now we're going to be introducing them at key points during your daughter's time at BGS, specifically in Years 4 and in Year 6. The parent-teacher consultations each term will focus on conversations about your daughter's progress in terms of basic, advancing and deep. In our school reports, we're going to be changing things slightly, and we're hoping to be able to provide more data in these reports so that you can have a much clearer picture of your daughter's progress across either milestone 1 or milestone 2. During Parents' Evening this term, in the autumn term, teachers will really be focusing on how the girls have settled into their new routines. They'll be looking at the measures of progress of where they are right now and about what targets they're working on. It's not until later on in the term that we'll start looking at the basic, advancing and deep scores. So this focus of conversation will take place in the spring term parents' evening. In our school reports, we're hoping to provide more data so that you have a clearer picture of your daughter's progress across either milestone 1 or milestone 2. So to summarise, see if I've met the objectives for this talk. I'm hopeful that you now have a better knowledge and understanding of our new assessment procedures, the milestones and the way we're assessing girls using the basic, advancing or deep understanding. I also hope you have a clearer picture of how we gather this information and how we use it to track girls as they progress through each year of their time in the junior school. Thank you very much for listening.